A 4 by 7-inch notebook sits behind glass in a museum in New Orleans. On its back cover, a young woman's photograph, her cheeks tinted pink by hand, decades before color photography existed. The man who carried this notebook into battle never saw his 19th Christmas with her. He wrote one line for whoever found it after he was gone: "Give this to Laura Mae Davis, the girl he loved." It would take 69 years for anyone to find her. In 1944, the United States Marine Corps landed on a 6-mile coral island in the Pacific most Americans had never heard of. The generals predicted 4 days. It took 74. Among the men who went ashore was a 22-year-old machine gunner from Indiana, carrying a notebook his high school sweetheart had given him before he shipped out. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today we tell the true story of Thomas Cotton Jones. Before the war, Thomas Jones was simply a boy from a small town. He played basketball for Winslow High School. Laura Mae Davis was a cheerleader for the same school, class of 1941. They started dating. He gave her his class ring. They went to prom together. Neither of them called it an engagement. They were just two teenagers in love in a small Indiana town, with no way of knowing what was coming. When Jones enlisted in the Marine Corps, Laura Mae gave him a small notebook. He carried it to Camp Elliott in San Diego, and there, less than a year before he would die, he made his first entry. He called it his life history of his days in the United States Marine Corps. He filled its pages with two things: his training and his love for the girl back home. He wrote that his heart was completely filled with her. He had no way of knowing those pages would outlive him by 7 decades. By the time Jones shipped out for the Pacific, the war had carried him far from Indiana. On September 15, 1944, the 1st Marine Division landed on Peleliu, a small coral island in the Peleliu group. American commanders predicted the island would fall in 4 days. They were wrong by a factor of nearly 20. The Japanese had changed their tactics. Instead of meeting the Marines on the beaches, they dug into caves, tunnels, and reinforced bunkers in the island's coral ridges, prepared to make every yard of ground cost American lives. The heat on Peleliu reached 115 degrees. Drinking water, shipped in recycled oil drums, came out tasting of fuel. Men who survived the bullets fell to heat exhaustion instead. Jones was a machine gunner, a job that kept him forward, exposed, laying down fire while the men around him advanced. There was no part of Peleliu that was safe. There was only the part that hadn't been hit yet. On December 1st, 1943, aboard the USS Maui, Jones made his last diary entry before the fighting that would kill him. He had won $200 in a dice game, bringing his total to $320. He wrote that if he were home, Laura Mae and he would have a wonderful Christmas. He wondered if he could wire her the money as a gift. He never got the chance. Here's where it gets strange. Jones did not write a will. He did not leave instructions for his parents, or his commanding officer, or the Marine Corps. He left one instruction, written into the pages of a notebook he assumed only he would ever read again, that if anyone found this diary after he was gone, they should return it to Laura Mae Davis, the girl he loved. He called it his last life request. So if you all get a chance, please return it to her. I am writing this as my last life request. On September 17th, 1944, the 3rd day of the assault, a Japanese sniper's bullet struck Thomas Jones between the eyes. He was 22 years old. His notebook, soaked in the same coral dust and salt air as every other Marine's gear on that island, somehow survived him. It made its way home in his personal effects. For decades, it sat in the keeping of his family, not lost, not destroyed, simply waiting. Nobody outside that family knew the notebook or the request inside it existed. In 2001, Jones's nephew Robert Hunt donated the diary and his uncle's other belongings to the National WWII Museum in New Orleans. Hunt knew about Laura Mae. He also knew she had married another man, an Army Air Corps serviceman, in 1945, the year after Jones died. Hunt made a decision. He gave the diary to the museum, but he never told Laura Mae it existed. He was afraid of stirring up old grief, afraid of disturbing a marriage built on a life that had moved forward. 12 years later, Laura Mae Davis Burlingame, 90 years old, a widow by then, visited that same museum with a tour group. She expected to see photographs, maybe a mention of the men Jones served with, She did not expect to find a glass case containing a notebook with her own teenage photograph filling its back cover, the cheeks tinted by hand in pink, the lips in red, exactly as a photo studio had colored it more than 70 years before. The museum's curator, Eric Rivet, pulled white gloves over his hands and let her hold the pages herself. In 17 years of working with wartime artifacts, he said, it was the first time he had watched someone find themselves inside one. Laura May read the words a 22-year-old boy had written to her from a troop ship in the Pacific, never knowing if they would reach her at all. They had reached her. It had simply taken 69 years. Laura May's tour group had to move on before she could finish reading. The museum scanned every page and mailed her a copy, so she could sit with Thomas Jones's words in her own home, in her own time. She kept his class ring. She kept the memory of a basketball player who loved a cheerleader in a small Indiana town, who went to the Pacific, and who used his last entry in this world to wonder whether he could send her a Christmas present he would never live to give. Thomas Cotton Jones is one of more than 8,000 American casualties from a 74-day battle that military planners once promised would take 4. His name does not appear in most histories of the Pacific War. His diary does. It sits in New Orleans now, available for any visitor to see, proof that a written promise, carried in a young man's pocket through a war that killed him, can still find its way home to the person it was written for. He asked a stranger to deliver it. A museum and 7 decades did the rest. America still stands because of men like this.